Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom Weekly from the Greater Orlando Center for Spiritual Living. Practical spiritual insights to help you live a more joyful, empowered, and grounded life.
Let's grow together. Thank you, Reverend Martin.
A few years ago, when I was senior minister at the Center for Spiritual Living, Florida Gulf Coast, over in the Tampa Bay area, we had a fellow who started attending quite often on Sunday mornings, and then all of a sudden, we didn't see him anymore. And one of our members ran into him in a store one day and asked why we hadn't seen him, and he replied, "Reverend Martin quotes the Bible too much." Well, too much is, of course, a very subjective thing, but you are hereby warned. Today's talk is going to be heavy on biblical references. In other words, I'm going to be preaching the gospel. Can I get an amen? Thank you, brothers and sisters. Well, my text today is from the Apostle Paul and his second letter to Timothy. Now, Timothy was one of Paul's protégés. They almost had a father-son relationship. And Paul writes to Timothy, "Stir up the gift of God, which is within you. For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." Stir up the gift of God. So let's break this down. First, where are the gifts? Well, according to Paul, you don't get them by going to a so-called holy place or by being blessed by the Pope or some guru. You don't acquire the gifts of God by praying or asking for them. The gifts of God are within you. And they always have been, and they always will be. The gifts of God are yours because you are alive, an expression of the one life. Now, spirit never makes anything that's useless. So, the fact that you are here means that you are important to life. And that importance is reflected in the fact that the gifts of God are within you. And what are those gifts? Well, if you're one of our regulars, you may have heard us recite Thomas Troward's list. Life, love, light, power, peace, beauty, and joy. Life is what you are. Love is how you got here. Light is the wisdom and insight you need to travel your path. Power is that part of your inner being that is totally undisturbed by external circumstances. Beauty is what can be found absolutely anywhere and everywhere if we are looking for it. And joy is the result of recognizing, using, and being grateful for all of our other gifts. During the years I was doing my ministerial training, I came up with my own list of the gifts of spirit. I'm not saying it's better, but it does have one small advantage, which I'll tell you about in a moment. So here's my list: life, love, and light, power, peace, and prosperity, wholeness, health, and happiness. Now, the small advantage for me is that it was easier to remember. You start with the 3 L's, life, love, and light, and then you have 3 P's, power, peace, and prosperity, and then you have wholeness, health, and happiness, which I think of as the 3 H's. I cheated a bit on that one. But whatever list we look at, no list can ever really encompass the gifts we're given. The gifts of God are infinite, just as God is infinite. It is only our use of these gifts that is limited, and even the gifts that we do use, we could be using much more effectively. Gifts do no good if they're not used. A couple of years ago, I was looking for something in my storage unit, and in the process of looking around, I discovered a box that contained Christmas gifts from 2017, things that I'd completely forgotten about. I was somewhat annoyed because I could have been using those gifts all this time. So, we don't have our spiritual gifts because we pass a test of righteousness. We have our gifts because we are God in expression. Spirit, therefore, really is giving to itself. Emerson said that it's possible to live without loving, or to give, rather. It's possible to give without loving, but it's impossible to love without giving. And by the same token, it's impossible for God to withhold our gifts because God is love. Well, all right, we have our gifts. What did Paul mean when he said we must stir up our gifts? Well, the words stir up suggest several possible meanings. Stir up means to integrate, and sometimes we forget that it takes all of our gifts combined to live a truly fulfilled life. Think of it this way. What good is having great power if you have no peace? What good is prosperity without your health? Jesus once asked, "What does it profit you if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul?" Well, when we put our attention and our focus on only one aspect of our lives, we neglect other aspects. We have to stir up our gifts because we need a blend of the many blessings of life. Think of it this way. What do you get if you dump flour, sugar, baking powder, eggs, oil, and flavorings into a baking pan, pop the pan in the oven for 40 minutes? You'll get a mess. You've got to stir up those ingredients, blend them together, and they then produce a result that is greater than the individual parts. Stir up can also mean to consciously change. The only constant in the universe is change. Change is always happening, whether we want it to or not. So if change happens anyway, would we rather let change affect us, or would we rather effect change? In other words, are we going to try to be in charge of the change, or will we let change toss us around like a boat in a storm? The gifts of God are our instruments for effecting change. Even the most positive, life-enriching change may require us to move outside the bounds of our comfort zones. We must learn very often to do things that we'd rather not do in order to do what it is that we truly want. Now, I'm not talking about being uncomfortable just for the sake of being uncomfortable. That is masochism. I mean being willing to grow into your dream by working through whatever is required to achieve the result you want. To use a personal example, I can tell you that it's very rewarding to be able to play the piano. And for several years in my life, I made a living in a very enjoyable way because of that ability. But learning to play the piano, that wasn't quite as thrilling. It was several years of practice, a lot of boring repetition, and frequent frustration. But no one ever became a competent pianist any other way. Stir up the gifts of God. Stir up can also refer to fanning the flames. That's another meaning. You know, it more nearly probably fits Paul's meaning. In those days, Greek was the language of the educated classes, and Paul was more than merely fluent in Greek. He was eloquent, and much of his writing is quite poetic. And the Greek word that we've translated as stir up actually means in Greek to kindle a flame or to keep a fire going. And throughout the Bible, spirit is frequently compared to a fire, that which provides light and warmth. And to have a fire, you need several things. You need a source of fuel, something flammable like wood or coal or gas or oil. And then you need a spark to get the fire going, a match, a flint, a lighter. And you need kindling, something that burns very easily, something with which you can start the fire, such as dry twigs, wood shavings, or paper. Well, how does all this apply to us spiritually? For our personal spiritual fire, our spark is an idea. The idea usually just pops into our heads, seemingly out of the clear blue. And even if it's the solution to a problem that we've been wrestling with, that solution generally arrives when we're thinking about or doing something else. It tends to happen when we're relaxed, because that's when we're the most receptive. So the idea is the initial spark. What about the kindling? Our kindling is whatever resources we already have, the people, places, and things that are part of our world. They all have the potential to provide fuel. And then we have the job of fanning our divine spark into a flame. So we start with the spark of an idea. Our kindling is the resources we have at hand, and our activity fans the flame. We may begin with a very tiny spark. It's up to us to turn it into a healthy flame, and that means we've got to do the work. Several years ago, I lived on the west coast of Florida in a little town called Newport Richey, and the main drag was Highway 19, and right on 19, which was a very busy roadway, a restaurant had just opened. These people had just taken over the building. They had painted it in an unusual combination of very attractive, happy colors. The place looked like fun, even including their name, Hullabaloos. And as I drove by, I thought to myself, this would be a great place to do sleight of hand magic from table to table, something that I had done professionally many years prior. And I told myself that I would stop by one day soon and introduce myself to the management and see if they were interested. Something fun for me to do. Well, for whatever reason, I didn't get around to visiting the place. So imagine my disgruntlement when I drove by one day and there on the marquee was Thursday Night's Magician. I had the spark, but I didn't use the kindling, and so I didn't fan the flame. Spark, kindling, flame. And then once you've got the fire going, it needs to be tended, continually fed, and nurtured, or it will go out. Negative thinking is the great enemy of your fire. It creates the wrong environment. There's no oxygen in a negative mindset, and the flame gets smothered. So we must be prepared to spend the time and energy necessary to keep our inner fire burning brightly. And that's another meaning of the phrase stir up, to be active. One of Jesus's parables was about a wealthy man who had to travel to a distant country. And before leaving, he delivered some money to each of his 3 servants and told them to be good stewards of what he had entrusted to them. And upon his return, the first 2 servants showed him how, by investing the money, they had doubled it. And the master was very pleased, and he shared the profit with his servants. But the 3rd servant explained that he took no chances. He buried the money, and there it still was, every penny of it. No less, but no more. And the master said, "You foolish man, you've squandered the gift. You receive no reward. So we can't bury our gifts. We need to stir them up. Stir up the gift of God, which is within you, for God has not given us a spirit of fear. F-E-A-R. You've probably heard the many acronyms that have been constructed out of those letters. False evidence appearing real, forgetting everything's all right. Emerson told us that fear always springs from ignorance. Ignorance of what? Ignorance of our gifts. If God be for us, who can be against us? Is there any power to oppose God? That is, if God is all there is, can God be opposed to God? And if God is all there is God everywhere? Well, there are a few places where God is not. God cannot be found in yesterday. God cannot be found in discouragement, fear, or any other thing that negates the gifts of life. God has not given us the spirit of fear, and furthermore, since fear is unreasonable, never try to reason with it. F-E-A-R. Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. Stir up the gift of God which is within you, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power. Jesus said, all power is given to me in heaven and in earth. Now remember, power is one of the gifts of spirit. So next time you find yourself between a rock and a hard place, try this affirmation. All power is given to me in heaven and in earth. Metaphysically speaking, heaven is the realm of the mind, which is where creation occurs, and earth is the realm of effect or result. So we can say that all power is given to me because mind is the creator of my experience. God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of love, but of power and of love. And just like fanning the flames, love is an action. Like every other gift of the Spirit, love is nothing at all until we put it into practice. No one will ever know what you mean when you say God is love unless you act it as well. Love is the divine impulse behind helping others. Love is being non-judgmental. Love always acts for the highest and best good of all. And as a bonus, perfect love casts out fear. The book of Romans tells us that all things work together for good to those who love God. Not that it's all good, but that all things work together for good. I have no idea if love really makes the world go around, but at the very least, it makes the trip a lot more enjoyable. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Now, this is the greatest gift of all. Your mind is really your use of God mind. It's the greatest gift because absolutely everything is within that mind, and we have access to as much of that everything as we can accept. We're free to choose what we think, a choice which is unique to humans. But with that power, with that freedom, comes responsibility. The order of the Jesuits say, we can give you an education, but we must teach you how to think. And that's what we're trying to do here. We don't tell you what to think. We try to tell you how to think. And the rest is up to you. Mortimer Adler tells us that the care and feeding of the mind are just as important as the care and feeding of the body. The mind unfed weakens just as the body does. The mind not sustained by the continued intake of something that's capable of filling it well or nourishing it that mind shrinks and shrivels. Or, using the Apostle Paul's analogy, we must tend the flame and keep it burning. We can do that by study, by meditation, by affirmations, by prayer, whatever it takes to tend the flame. The highest and best use of mind are to stir up the gifts of God. It is your responsibility to stir up your gifts. And you stir up your gifts by developing, refining, enhancing, and using them. You are born with the potential to live an extraordinary life. You are created to accomplish something that no one else can accomplish. Your gifts will make room for you in the world and enable you to live your unique vision. You're created to stand out, not to blend in. If you believe you're too old or too young to use your gifts, you believe a lie. When you realize and develop your gifts, they will equip your vision with power. You are the result of the choices and decisions you make every day. You can choose to stay where you are right now, or you can choose to move forward in life by pursuing your God-given vision. Let your gifts influence the way you conduct your entire life. Your gifts will expand your thinking, increase your sight, and elevate your walk. Challenge yourself to stop making excuses for why you cannot accomplish what you're created to do. Get in gear. Take your life out of neutral. Most people do things because they have to. Wouldn't you like to do things because you've decided to, based on your gifts? God creates your gifts for you to use, but if you don't use them, you and the world will miss out. There's a wonderful book that's been around for decades. It goes through countless printings and revisions. It's called The Joy of Cooking. And it tells you how to gather up ingredients and combine them in such a way that it creates something delicious and nourishing. Well, the recipes for the joy of life can be found in any number of spiritual texts, but those recipes can also be found within. Life is what you are. Love is how you got here. Light is the wisdom and insight you need to travel your path. Power is added to light to bring your ideas into experiences and forms. Peace is that part of your inner being that is totally undisturbed by external circumstances. Beauty is what can be found anywhere and everywhere if we're looking for it. And joy is the inevitable result of recognizing, using, and being grateful for all of our other gifts. Stir up the gift of God, which is within you. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Yes, it does take work, but it's your life. Have you got anything better to do? Life is calling you to get busy and stir it up. And so it is.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Spiritual Wisdom Weekly. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, follow us on social media at Greater Orlando Center for Spiritual Living, and support our work, including this podcast, at gocsl.org. Until next time, take good care and keep growing in spirit.